right, everyone. Welcome to not the first episode. I guess technically it is the first episode, but this is more like an intro episode of the Spectre of Anti-Blackness podcast. My name is Owen. I'm the host of this podcast. I'm going to start by addressing some of the most pertinent questions that I get asked about the podcast, from all the people. No, the Spectre of Anti-Blackness, it's not like, I'm not the Spectre. The Spectre is more like a faceless entity. It's more of an idea. We can address that question a little later. That one's a little tough. But one of the most popular questions I get asked, I'm walking down the street and people will come up to me and they'll say, we love the podcast. It's great. It's the number one podcast. But what are we going to talk about? And I feel like that's a really good place to start. So I've been writing different ideas, when I consume pieces of media and it's something that really sticks with me, whether it's good or bad, I'll write it down. And so this podcast is a way of kind of just putting those ideas out there for other people to be able to also hear and kind of form their own opinions, or kind of talk with me about my opinions, or just know what other people are thinking out there about the different things they consume, that sort of thing. So there's these two separate series I want to do on the podcast. The one is dealing with this idea that I thought of a little while ago, where it feels like it feels as though our institutions have no interest in changing. They just want us to shut up and buy something. Now this idea is a lot larger than just media. I feel like it has to do with our society as a whole, living in a capitalistic society. But I see it a lot in media, and it happens a lot in today's ecosystem, where it's now cool to be black. People are, since we've embraced being black now, wider society is like, oh, it's like, yeah, of course they've always fetishized blackness or whatever, but now we're seeing this new surge of entertainment that comes out, that it's basically just the same stories that have been told before, but now just with black faces on top of it. The changes are only skin deep. Different things that I like to talk about in this little mini series on the podcast. Black Panther is going to be one of the things. I know that movie's about 4 or 5 years old at this point. I feel strongly about this movie. I didn't think it was... Okay, so again, my thoughts on it, they're mixed. Mixed thoughts on Black Panther. I feel like it could have been so much more, but I also feel like it did a lot. So that's something we can talk about in the episode. Of course, I won't get too much into it now. But Black Panther is something that I'd like to talk about. The Miles Morales Spider-Man video game. That's actually something. I just finished the second playthrough of it on the New Game Plus. I did the Ultimate. First I did it on, I think the highest they have the first time you go through Spectacular. I like to play games on the hardest difficulty, but I digress. So I just beat it through the second time on New Game Plus Ultimate, and I want to talk about that too. That one, it's frustrating. That game is frustrating. So that's another thing I'll be talking about in this scenario of in this series. I'm sure there may be other titles that I'd like to talk about in that series, but I just can't think of them right now. I don't know if there's also titles that, just feature black characters, but don't really tell black stories. Like, they just tell stories. Like, it doesn't really matter if the characters are black. Oh, Soul, that recent movie that came out, Disney and Pixar, that one is actually a good example of this. I feel like that was handled very well, and I very much enjoyed that movie, even though it didn't really have to do with the main character's blackness much at all. I mean, the setting sort of, but that wasn't very explored too much, and I feel like that was fine. The second series I want to do is going to be talking about the commodification of the revolution in America. It's something that I feel like kind of happened a little bit in like the 90s and 2000s, but there's been like a resurgence in recent years. We have these leaders, these outspoken people back in the civil rights era: Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, James Baldwin, Medgar Evers. Like, there's a ton of people, forward thinkers, who arose around this time. Huey Newton was another one, and they were killed. Most of the time, if the government didn't have, if they weren't directly responsible, they at least had some hand in it, or were at least advocating for deaths. At any rate, that happened. They were fighting against the institution, and they were killed because of it. And now we're seeing the very institutions that they were fighting against are now profiting off of making movies about them, which is disheartening, to say the least. So I'd like to talk about movies like, I don't know if we'll go as far back as like Malcolm X or even Selma, but for sure we gotta talk about Judas and the Black Messiah, and I'm sure there's others, but again, I can't remember them right now. Oh, there's also that one that Amazon did. I actually haven't seen it yet, so I have to see it, and then I can talk about it. One Night in Miami. But yeah, there's a lot of movies that encompass this idea of like, there's resurgence, maybe not even resurgence, but there's this new influx of black creators who are getting mainstream, and I feel like that's really good. And then there's also, the black actors and such, which is also good. But then there's also white creators with black actors, and then there's there's black creators and black actors, but at the end of the day, we don't have anything new being done. We don't really have good black stories or even good stories being told. It's like these people are just puppets almost in the face of just, the over-rampant capitalism. It's like, see, we're giving you, look, it's black people, okay, so come to the movie, continue to spend, continue to be a part of the system. And I am not advocating for, I'm not really getting into any of that at all. I'm just saying, we could be doing better. But yeah, those are two topics that I want to talk about. The commodification of the revolution, and the, just black faces come, the skin deep changes in different pieces of media. I also want to do reviews of different things that don't really fit into these categories, but I feel like I just want to talk about and see what other people think about and that sort of thing. I'll try to get other people on the podcast. I don't want this to just be a monologue or a soliloquy. I don't know which one it would be, but I want to actually have dialogue. I want to converse with people, and whether that's just through comments, actually having someone on the podcast with me, doesn't matter. But I'd like it to be that way. Other things I'd like to talk about, like Antebellum, that movie that came out, I suppose it was a couple of years ago now. Maybe we can even talk about like specific concepts, like the concept of a token black character. Like, what does that really mean? What does it look like? How do you not have a token black character? Maybe we can talk about things like that. I'm really nervous about the new video game that's coming out next year, I believe it is, by Square Enix. I don't remember what it's called, but I know it features a black female lead, and she's from like our time, but she gets sent to like this, I don't know if she gets sent through time or space or both, but she ends up in like this, like not medieval, but it's kind of like Horizon Zero Dawn, but they're like actual animals, It's like a fantasy type world. She gets into a fantasy magic type world. And it's, they're like, oh, we've got like these women who are writing the story and writing the character. But then it's like, but none of them are black. And like, oh, well, yeah, we interviewed a lot of, people of color and indigenous folks to really get an idea for how this character should be, but still you don't have any black writers, so that's raising a red flag for me. It's like, yeah, sure, we got women in there, which is great because you're writing a woman, so you want women to be writing the woman, but no one in there is black, and that's, I feel like that's important. I feel like we probably need that, right? The game looks fun, and I can't really say anything about it now. The few articles that I've read say, people were kind of just voicing the same thing as me. They're like, I don't know. Well, the one was kind of saying the same thing like that. The other one was saying the story feels bland, and I distinctly remember another one saying that, I don't know if it was the writer or someone working on the game said that, something alarming about the character. I can't remember it now. She had like some kind of like walk or something, and they said it very weird and like in a strange way, but that's getting too deep into it. I can save that for later. I think it'd also be cool to talk about different ideas that I have, like movie ideas or TV show ideas or game ideas, because that's also stuff that I've been tossing around for a few years. And who knows, maybe at some point we will branch out from talking about just entertainment, and then we can also talk about just like general, life in general, just, about community and revolution and spirituality, and also, just things that are important. I have a list of things that I want to watch, and then when I watch them, I'll talk about them on here. And then I also have a list of things that I have watched that I would like to talk about, but I haven't named yet. Black is King, I feel like, is a very complex piece of media that I like to talk about, but I want to wait for that one, like when I have someone else on the podcast, for sure. Let's see what else. There are pieces of media that I consume that I will not be talking about. For instance, I'm talking about this Miles Morales game, which I just played through twice. I've played through The Last of Us Part 2, I think like 4, maybe 5 times at this point. And that game is so interesting to me. Like, I don't even really like it that much, but for some reason I keep playing it. And I have a lot of thoughts around that as well. But it's not really, like, I'd have to discuss that elsewhere if people really wanted to hear about that, because it's not really fitting with the topic of this cast, Are there black characters in that? I think there's one, and you murder her pretty good. Yeah, but like just single characters, like for example, new Spider-Man movies, MJ's black. I feel like there's not really much to talk about there when it's just like a single character. I mean, maybe, I don't know, but that's pretty much everything that I can think of at this point of what I'll be talking about, at least in the beginning here. So we've got these 2 different mini-series that we'll be doing. Skin Deep and Commodification of the Revolution, I think is what they're called. And then after that, different reviews of different things that I've seen or played, yada yada, if I'm not discussed in those first series. And I think that's it for now. So yeah, I hope that answers the question for everyone that was wondering what are we going to be talking about. That's what we're going to be talking about. So if that sounds exciting to you, stay tuned. I'm sure I'll get one of these out soon. I've procrastinated long enough starting this thing, so I'm sure it's a new year soon, so I don't know what that has to do with anything, but it'll happen. Don't worry about it. If you subscribe, do people subscribe to podcasts? Is that a thing? They're coming. I say they're coming. But anyway, thanks for listening to this. Give it another listen if you missed something. And have a wonderful whatever time of day it is or night. Enjoy yourself out there. Until next time.